I'm wow, now it tells you that the recording is in progress.
Oh,
um,
can I mention something that I noticed from the recording from our last general meeting, which is if you don't want to be in
yes,
the recording, you should turn off your video when this starts. Um, and if you want to be in the recording, then go ahead and keep it on. But you will be in the recording if you keep your video on.
yes. Thank you, Ryan.
You're going to change it to pin it to where it's just showing her screen though, right? So it shouldn't.
Yes. So you shouldn't really be seen anyways, but
This is all new, so feel free to chat me all your advice for this. But yes, she will be pinned.
yes. Okay, so at a time, okay. I'm so sorry. I'm such a spaz. Okay. Um, so Sarah Sylvia is here to give a presentation, and here is her bio. At a time when more students are diagnosed with learning challenges than ever before, we can all improve as teachers when we lean into the growth mindset. Sarah Sylvia's teaching focuses on communication, connection, and relationships in her studio. She's taught students ages 3 to 72, often with an assortment of exceptionalities. Her studio includes English language learners as well as others who experience focus and energy issues ranging from ADHD to challenges with executive function or developmental delays. Many of her students benefit from extra support in their musical studies with more explicit directions and practice assignments. Sylvia believes in her students and she sees them as whole and complete. Sylvia holds a Master of Music degree from University of Washington and has taught at the Bainbridge Island Music Guild and John Stanford International School. Her article on beginning to teach online was published in the Clarion in April 2020. She is presented on teaching rhythm online at the Edmonds Music Teacher Association, as well as an imagination music masterclass. She looks for the divine spark in each person she teaches and sets them up to surpass expectations. So, great. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is such a treat to be here and to be sharing with you. I think the very first thing I want to do is to take care of some business right at the start and pop a few links into the chat. So I'm going to do that while I tell you that I have 3 cats, and if they decide to run across the table while I'm presenting, I tried. So we'll hope for the best there. So there are a few precise resources that I will be mentioning, and that's what I'm linking in the chat for you. That way I don't have to do it later. And there we are. Okay, so I wanted very first of all to give a shout out to Jeffrey Pettyjohn, because this is a presentation that grew out of a conversation we had together in Tacoma at a state conference. That I was mentioning to Jeffrey that as a teacher, when I go to a conference, I'm so excited to learn and to grow as a teacher. And I go knowing that my studio is full of like a standard 50% average Johnny, and then I've got that cluster of like, bless her heart, below average Susie. And then I would show up at the conference, and most of the conferences seem really aimed at teach your award-winning student how to get even better at articulating Chopin. And that's wonderful. But today's presentation is aimed at that middle of the road student that we all have so many of, and music should be for everyone. So I wanted to say thank you, Jeffrey, for your encouragement. Without that conversation and your explicit, clear, go get 'em, this would not be happening today. So what we're going to do is overview some of my very favorite tried and true teaching techniques. And I hope to end with an open mic time where we can all share collectively, because your presence here today tells me that you are a professional who cares about professional development and who wants to better themselves as a teacher. People like that already are good teachers, and I'm sure that each of you has a secret trick, and you're going to be comparing, going, I wonder if she does the thing I do. Please share with us at the end. I hope to hear and learn from all of you, but I'll definitely go first. So if there's only one thing you can take away from today, It is that I want you to learn about spaced repetition and to begin to use spaced repetition in your teaching and your students practicing and even your own. I'll start by explaining that it is what it sounds like, that you repeat things but with stuff spaced in between. For myself, this means that if I have a tricky spot, maybe there's a leap that I can't nail, I mark exactly that spot, I'm as precise as possible, and I do it 3 or 4 times. Your brain is wired to enjoy and appreciate new experiences. So if you say, I need to do it 20 times and then I'll be all right. Well, after the 3rd time, your brain went out to lunch. It's not engaged anymore. And you can knock on it and try to get it to be engaged, or you could use spaced repetition. So I do this by 3 times the hard thing, page 1, 3 times of the hard thing, page 2, 3 times of the hard thing, page 3, and so on. This lets me take advantage of the way that my brain thinks and still get in the same number of repetitions. And it does work for everyone. For some people, it takes longer than others. In a lesson setting, my studio is presently preparing for a Halloween recital. We're hoping to get the last of the recordings done this week. I have some anxious performers, don't we all? And so I use spaced repetition to help them prepare. We start off with a cold performance, introduce your piece, play it, do your bow, and then I ask them to play me their scales. And we say, that was great, please perform your piece. And they do their cold performance again. And then I ask for Twinkle Twinkle. And then we do their performance again. And I can sometimes get 5 or 6 performances spaced out through a lesson, and it better simulates a recital setting where you must perform once and only once and then walk away and say, it's done, I did my best. So this is something that your students can take advantage of, that you can take advantage of. If you're wanting to fix that one tricky rhythm that they haven't gotten, or the key change where the sharps are just never where they need to be, try spaced repetition. It will change your life. Your students will think you're crazy until the 2nd time when they've seen it work before. So we're going to experience spaced repetition today throughout the lesson. Presentation. I'm already in teacher mode. I thought I would encourage you to teach form analysis right from the very beginning. And so I'm going to get out my favorite primer book, and we're going to turn to Ode to Joy. When I teach form analysis, I don't say, we're going to learn about formal compositional structure. I ask my students, what is the same and what is different? When a beginning student is learning to read music and to play an instrument, they're processing a lot of information. Which hand does that? What is my finger number? What is the correct key? What is the name of the key? Oh my gosh, I have to do all this at a correct time. It's a lot. And so if you ask that child, is the 2nd line of Ode to Joy the same as the top or different? More than half of your students will say, oh, it's definitely different. They won't identify that it's been copied and pasted. And yes, you can use that information with today's generation. After an online pandemic, we all know copied and pasted. So what you may have to do with the child who says they're definitely different is have them get out 2 hands and go through and point an E and an E, an E and an E, an F and an F, a G and a G, and go through note by note. And somewhere around 5 or 10 notes in, they'll go, wow, it's identical. And what I want you to have your student do is mark the first different note. That's not till over here. Being super, super clear about form will speed up practicing and learning, will speed up memorization, and will lead to clearer performances as well. And this is where we're going to come to that first link. I adore multicolored crayons. These things are fantastic. I like Crayola Twistables because, oh, we're going to get the logo right up. You don't get wax on your fingers. You can sanitize them between every student, and it lasts for several years, as opposed to the paper kind where they're hard to clean, your fingers get waxy, and sometimes your students will break them. So a crayon like this is my favorite tool for ages 10 and under. You can hand it out and say, please mark every middle C in your music, and they will cheerfully splash a bunch of color on the page. You can say, please circle every quarter rest, and they will have a really good time. You can have them draw a smiley face or a star after every single piece that they pass. And you can hand them your special crayon and ask, please mark the first different note. This is actually something I still do, that if I'm comparing the exposition and the recapitulation, I'll go through and find the first different note, because if I can nail that spot where the fork in the road begins, I can play to the end easily. I just have to know where the split happens. And sometimes I'll be a month into learning a piece and I'll discover that the split actually happened a page earlier than I thought it did. And that's embarrassing, but better safe than sorry. So form analysis for me with a very young student just begins with that question: what is the same and what is different? As your student ages, crayons become less interesting. I am such a big fan of erasable pens. Pilot Frixion has these things, and they're like, it's like spy technology, that the rubber nib creates enough heat that the ink will disappear. I don't use this on Urtext editions, but if you're in a method book or you're teaching scales and technique, this is great. On a photocopy, it's wonderful. You can pass these out, and if there's a lot of ink on the page, a hairdryer will erase it, and putting it in the freezer will bring back some of it. These things are awesome. They come in a ton of colors. And yes, there's an Amazon link. So have a good time with these. It's a fine enough point that you can write in the music. You can write sharps and flats and naturals. Love this so much. They do have a highlighter as well. We'll get into that in a little bit. This is where I want to remind you that spaced repetition is amazing. It is my hope for you that this will be your number one takeaway, that spaced repetition will help your students to remember things, and it will help practicing to go much, much better. The next topic that I want to do is eye tracking, and I'm deeply indebted to Krista Seeley for mentioning that most of what she teaches is eye tracking, and I had never even heard of the phrase. So what I want to do next is play a complete video for you, and I hope I'm able to share a screen and sound. But this video has really cool technology, and we'll explain a lot of it. So instead of a million words, we're just going to watch the video together. Sharing sound. Here we go.
I'm Daniel Beliowski, and I'm a professional pianist. I've been playing for 33 years. I am a professor, a filmmaker, and a Steinway artist. You guys ready?
Yep, look at the camera. Okay, look at Alex. Look at me. All right, Muna. Good. All right, go ahead.
In looking at the footage, I expect that for the most part, I won't be looking at my hands, but probably just getting reference zones. For the more involved pieces, I will have to at least coordinate where my hands have to go. So I'll look probably ahead of where my hands have to be. You want to give it a try?
I'm Charlotte Bennett, and I've been studying with Daniel Beliowski for 2 years.
You know, your eyes are generally a lot busier than I would have expected, only because this piece between the two hands, especially that segment, sits in a fairly limited register.
It was me making a mistake and going, nah.
Getting pretty dizzy.
Yeah. Same thing.
How come I don't feel that way when I'm playing? If I look at one hand or the other, I, as soon as possible, jump back to the middle. So it's interesting for me. I don't think I ever realized that I'd do that. sight reading, you have to be a little bit ahead of where your hands are. So the eyes have to be ahead. And I find it interesting that I kind of scan vertically as well as linearly, horizontally. So I'm going up and down, and I'm scrolling along.
Both things were in peripheral vision the whole time, so you weren't really looking directly at one thing or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different than where he's looking. I'm looking directly at the music and kind of looking directly between the two instead of keeping them both in my peripheral vision.
It's really interesting. Again, it's something that I would expect as a teacher is until you get really comfortable with the keyboard, you're going to continuously look back and forth like this between the sheet music and the keyboard. And because I've just had so much more experience, relatively speaking, no offense, but I just feel very comfortable with the keyboard and I don't have to look.
So I'm going to stop the screen share there. I have my fingers crossed that that worked out and that the video didn't pause a whole bunch. I am so excited that this video exists. I cannot believe that somebody invented glasses that will show where you're looking and that somebody put them on a Steinway artist and a student and let us see what they're seeing. I've watched this video multiple times. I watch it with my students. I have a student presently doing that Rachmaninoff piece with all the leaping, and being able to show a student, here is what a professional sees when they do what you're doing, is life-changing. So at a beginning level, and we're gonna go back to, let's not do Ode to Joy, we'll pick a different piece. We have all grabbed a pencil and pointed at the notes one by one to help the students play and follow along. We're teaching eye tracking right from the very beginning. We're teaching a student that music goes from left to right. We're teaching them that when they look down at their hands and they look back up, that this is the next note. We're showing eye tracking right from the very beginning. As you get a little farther on and you start to do the grand staff, for those of us that are pianists, turning over here, I know for a long time I've taught grand staff where I'm using two fingers like this. What I'm trying to teach is that eye tracking happens for both staves at the same time. This has to be taught because otherwise we've all had that student, I hope, who plays you only the right hand and then goes back and plays you only the left hand. Please tell me I'm not alone on this. Yeah. So you teach that eye tracking happens, as Daniel said in the video, vertically and linearly at the same time. And you're showing them that with your hands. As you get farther on to more advanced music with jumps, you need to be teaching them how to look at the page, look at the piano, and go back and forth. The cool part is that you can teach this. I suspect that brighter, more talented students just absorb this out of the air and do it effortlessly. Your beginner student may be held up because, like Charlotte, the student, said, she's looking zoomed in at the music and then looking down at her hands, where the professional sat a little farther back and kept both in peripheral view at the same time. For 12 and unders, I issue a challenge. If you can play your piece without needing to pause for the jumps, I have to play it with my eyes closed and get all the jumps. Kids love to make your life difficult, and they will work really hard to earn that trick. Yes, you'll have to memorize it. Hopefully you already know whatever piece they're working on. Eye tracking can be planned. I find that often when I have a tricky jump that I need to land, I need to plan where I'm looking, because human nature is that we look at the dot and then we look at where our hands are. But you don't need to. You already know where your hands are. So you can cut out a step by looking at the page, looking where you're going, and then as soon as you move it, you can look back up at the page. It is super important, and this is where that highlighter might come into play, to at least mentally know where you're looking at. How often have you been in a performance and you've nailed the hardest spot in your song and gone, yes, and you look up because you're an accompanist, so you have all your music, and it's as if the page is completely white. There's nothing on it, and you have no idea where you are. You need to memorize not just where do you look down and where do you move to, but look back where you are. And yes, Jeffrey, I see you aim with your eyes. For my younger students, we talk about pretending your eyes are a laser pointer. I don't demonstrate this because, again, cats, and it would be painful for everybody involved. Checking in on my notes. Other places where eye tracking are deeply helpful is for line breaks. That if you sit there and you start paying attention, is the trouble that your student can play each line really well, needs to take a beat and then start the second line. That either means that they're practicing each line many times and not the whole piece enough, or that they have a little bit of trouble with that 6-inch leap with their eyes. Even worse is getting from the bottom of a page to the start of the next page. As you start teaching this, you'll notice those jumps smooth out and your piece will flow much better. I think that's all I wanted to say about eye tracking. So I'm going to loop back around and say that I really hope your number one takeaway from today is spaced repetition, and that it is my favorite and most valuable teaching trick. As long as we're talking about eyes, I wanted to share with you some of the ways that I combat visual overwhelm. I think we've all received a new piece of music, opened the book and gone, it's too hard, and then closed it and said, I really need to clean my bathroom. And then we get the nerve back up to practice and we say, no, I really need to email that parent. It's visual overwhelm. So trick number one is hide the page. So you're only looking at one page instead of two. This can go a long way. But if your student is still overwhelmed, I like to use the Post-it note trick. We all have these. They're easy to use and cheap. Place your Post-it note so they can only see the first measure. This will make their life so much better. You will still sometimes have an overwhelmed student who will say, no. Have them count how many notes are in the measure. And they will suddenly say, oh, it's 5 notes, it's 10 notes. I've been scared of not so much. If they're still overwhelmed, have them count how many notes are in the right hand or the left hand. Get it down to a manageable chunk, they'll be fine. When I'm asking my students to work on a challenge piece, and it's the hardest thing they've ever done, it's a full level ahead, I will ask them to learn 1 measure a day, and we sit there and we count that at the end of 30 days, they'll be able to play the Bach Musette, the new Sonatina, and it takes that challenge piece and it puts it into tiny bites. The part I don't tell them at the beginning is that I'm not going to count identical measures. And so all of those formal analysis things, and I'm writing this in their music too. Goal, learn to hear by next lesson date. I'm super, super clear in the music. So it shortens the goal. They're not looking at the whole page. Katie, I want to come back to your thing about Post-it note tape because I'm not familiar with that and I want to know. But at this point, I'm going to say spaced repetition is my favorite teaching trick, and it's my hope that it will be your number one takeaway from today. The next thing I want to talk about is something that, as far as I know, I haven't encountered with any other teacher. It's one that I built as I was working with a student who had a lot of trouble mastering music. And once we got this technique honed, it literally cut her learning time in half. She's an extreme case where she was working very slowly, and so we were able to cut it in half. But realizing that before I sit down to play a piece, I have a mental list of the tricky spots. Maybe I already practiced them that way, maybe they're already marked. But my mental list would go something like, get the tempo right, first page is not so bad, there's kind of a cluster at the bottom of the second page where I have to have a leap, and there's the tricky counting, and I have to focus on left hand and right hand, and then turn the page, and then the second page is just fine after the page turn. That mental map of focus points is so, so powerful. It's like a grocery list that you have to nail all of those things. Doing this before a performance can make it sound like you had 2 extra weeks to practice. If you're working in a church setting where there's a high volume of music that just goes past you every week, this is amazing. Highly recommend. That reminds me of something I meant to say earlier about eye tracking, that when I'm working with a conductor, I practice the eye tracking that's involved in breaking contact with my score and my instrument to look at the conductor and look back at the music. So important to do that in those places where you know he's going to want to retard, or she. So that mental map of focus points. This is another place where I love the colorful pens. If I know that my music will be visible to the audience, I might use a more subdued color like a blue. But if it's just for my students, whatever color they feel led to will be fine. Next up, I would like to remind you that spaced repetition is such a powerful and amazing tool. It will help your students to remember so much more. The last tool that I want to draw your attention to is the power of self-evaluation. This tool evolved over several years of teaching, and it now comes with 5 settings. Awesome, almost good, neutral, could have been better, almost bad, and bad. And between ourselves, I never tell my students they did a bad job. That's for them to say out loud. They usually already know. But I borrowed the sight reading test standards from the music literacy program. And we sit there and one by one, again, right from that Ode to Joy level. So this is 30 pages into my favorite primer method. This is very, very early for me to look at a student and say, how did you do at playing the right notes? And usually they know, or they know that they played all of them right except the repeated notes. And then to go through and say, how did you do at the right counting? And I've had students say the notes were awesome, and then they think the counting is awesome, but I think their counting is here. And so I can send them home to say your counting needs to be as good as your playing. The third criteria that I have is thinking pauses, which would present much like a counting trouble, but the difference between I don't understand which notes are long and which notes are short is so different from, oh my gosh, is that a C chord or a G chord? So they sound the same, but the fix is quite different because asking a student to work on their counting when they really need to learn the notes is not helpful for anybody. I've even sat there and said, when you play your piece, I feel confused because I thought your first page was great and your second page was a little wonky, but your third page was great. So we just need to get your middle page to match the outside pages. With some students, we've discovered that they're rating themselves here and below, and I'm rating them here. And what we find is that if I establish that I'm the expert and the keeper of the standard and I think they're here, they have no business saying my notes are meh when I think they're getting 100% of them right. And that's where you start to see self-esteem rise. The other thing that will happen is I've had a student who, she was a transfer with quite a long break. And so at our very first lesson, I vividly remember she sat down and she played a piece for me. And at the end, she flung her hands up like an Olympic gymnast. Yes, nailing it. And I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, she played half the notes right. Half. What are we going to do? And so I spent 2 years working with this young lady on the standard is here, here's where you are, let's work together to meet it. And I think at the end of that time, her parents commented that this child's self-esteem had improved so much. I think it's because everyone had been blindly praising her for all she did. And I was the first person to come alongside this homeschooled kid and say, things could be better. Let's help you improve. And she saw herself get better, and it was such a powerful experience. Is she going to win a competition? No, I don't care. It was a powerful experience for teacher and student, and that's why we do what we do. But that has to be very gently done, which is why, again, I never ever give a student this rating. I will occasionally say, woo, and they usually crank it way down for themselves. And I say, okay, yeah, that needs work. As the student gets older, I will ask about a 4th category, which is dynamics and mood. And we talk about how to unlock things or connect better with the music. I see that we have a little bit of time. So I'm going to say again, I hope that your number 1 takeaway is that spaced repetition is deeply valuable. And then I want to share 2 bonus things with you that evolved over Zoom teaching. The first one happened because we've all been working on something and seen our computer charger start to flicker and gone, no, press save, press save. And so I've joked with your students that you have a save button and it's right here. And after they get something right, I have them press save. And it's silly, but it underlines that that's the thing I really want them to know. The other thing is that we've all seen a piece of technology start to freeze and stop functioning really well. and you restart it and it works like new again. And so I've asked my students, did you know that everyone comes with a reset button? And they get very curious. And we say, yes, it's located right here. And if you press the top of your head, you can reset. And what this does is it acknowledges frustration and I'll say malfunction, but it also says that you can start over. And I was so proud of my student on Monday because she was getting frustrated, and I'll admit I was too. And she stopped and said, reset, reset, reset. And the level of self-awareness and memory and transfer of learning, and to be able to say, I need to try again from a fresh starting point. And she nailed it after that. So as adults, I can't press my own reset button, but I can pursue that through self-care, through taking a beat, taking a deep breath, counting to 10. And on a kid level, it's so powerful to know that you can access that through a little bit of silliness. So here's where I would love to ask people to pop stuff into the chat or to unmute and join in. I'm scrolling through the chat to see if there were any questions besides kitties should make an appearance. Press save, love this. Katie, could you unmute and tell us about what Post-it note tape is? I'm aware of highlighter tape and I love it. Is that the same thing?
Yeah. No, it's so Post-it tape is like this. And you can just like, it's taped and it's like the sticky part of a Post-it. And so you just cover and this particular size is like kind of perfect for music. So I like if I tell a student to work on a specific part, or only up to a certain part, I always use like tape like this, because otherwise, I don't know, the visual overwhelm will, they might not look at it at all if they're looking at too much. And then if there's a specific part that I want them to play, that's like in the middle, I'll use like highlighter tape.
Awesome.
Which
I'll add, so highlighter tape I discovered because I am a hobby knitter, and knitters adore highlighter tape for marking where were they and where are they going to start again, or what should they look at while they're knitting. But it's deeply useful in music. I remember my church choir was doing a really involved piece where sometimes it was open score and sometimes it was on a condensed grand staff for the choir, and it kept flip-flopping back and forth. And so I went through and I marked every page where my part was because I kept getting confused. And so I see a cat. Do tell me your cat's name.
Oh, this is Mouse.
Mouse.
She's a cat. Clear.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
I would love to mention at this point that I've been having my students do homework with their pets of any sort, that I discovered through a survey that my students primarily interact with their animals with their dominant hand only. And so I've been literally writing in their homework assignment, please give your cat or your dog left-handed pets, and then please pet your cat or dog with both hands, and that two-handed stimulation. And then I've gotten back some very serious, the dog loves it, written back in the assignment book. But that this is a great way to introduce hands together work with beloved family pets.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right?
Do you give like, when you write down assignments, do you give like a checklist, or how do you do that? What do you think works best for that?
So this has been very interesting because it's evolved a little bit over Zoom, that I was having them take dictation. And so the assignment always has the date and then the page number and the title of the piece. And after that, the things I want them to change. And I usually go for 3 things or less and broader concepts, because specific things I want marked in the piece of music itself. So the assignment might say things like work on the counting, practice the middle extra, or practicing backwards, which requires some explanation because I don't mean in retrograde. We're going to stick with the cat theme here. If there's a better way to explain this, I would love to know. But to me, practicing backwards means do the last line, do the line before that, do the second line, do the first line, and then play the piece forward. And what it helps to do is to balance out the quality of the piece. So my students' assignment book might say, work on the counting like we did in the lesson, practice backwards, and dynamics.
sometimes my students some of my students, or even most, I would say, need like incredibly specific directions. Like if I want them to practice backwards, I have to put like, a cat on the last line and then a dog on the line before and then smiley face. And so I have to say, cat, dog, smiley face, first line. Like, and they're all separate checks. But
Okay.
it doesn't really build independence, but I don't know. Because if I just said practice backwards, I don't know if they do it. Or I don't.
So the first time that you do it, you have to do it in the lesson.
Yeah.
And then it becomes something known. So when I'm writing practice backwards, that's like the 5th time they've seen that assignment. But that's the shorthand condensed version. My studio is really unique at the moment that because I didn't see a lot of people drop during the pandemic, I have no beginners. Everyone I'm teaching right now, I've taught for 2 years. I've like forgotten how to introduce middle C. I see that Karen says, I suggest my students practice first the last phrase, then start at the second to the last phrase and play to the end, third to the last phrase. So that's learning backwards. My students are so relieved to find out what I mean. Yes, 100%. Many of my students are under the impression that means to play it in retrograde. And I don't think I'm up for that.
Yeah.
So if I can chime in here, and it only works for the little ones, but I tell them we're going to build a train, and the last measure is like the engine, and then keep adding a car to it.
Oh, I love that.
Kids can get the boxes and the cars and the measures and make it all work. But yeah, I was looking for something too.
Yeah, I've been inviting my students to help me name stuff because I'm going to say rubbish at naming things. There's a reason that when I teach tones, they're named things like the ringy bell sound and the petting the cat sound. And so I've been asking my students to name stuff, and that's how we wind up with spaced repetition. If you're 10 and under, is called sandwich practicing for my studio, but that's their name for it. Using student language when interacting with students is deeply impactful because that's how they think. It's part of why I no longer teach line notes. I talk about a note with a line through it because that's how a child describes it. So we talk about a note with a line through it and a note in between the lines. And eventually over a year, we graduate to line and space notes because it's just so powerful. So this is where I would love to invite each of you, if there's a special sauce kind of a thing, I would love to hear snuggly space notes. I love that. I would love to hear from you all. What is your favorite way to connect with a student, or the moment where you go, yes, we finally mastered the thing that took us 6 lessons to get? Please tell us. We'd all love to improve together. And I can't see folks, so if you're waving at me, I'm going to just encourage you to unmute and jump in.
Sarah, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question again?
That I suspect everybody has their own favorite teaching moment. And I would love to hear from you either what phrases connect with your students or what your favorite teaching tips are. That I'd love to turn this into an open mic session, that if we could pass the mic around the table, clearly mine is spaced repetition with a large side helping of counting out loud. What works for your students?
So I actually kind of sharing, but I wanted to get feedback on this too, because you were talking about specifically Ode to Joy, and that's a great one to show the same and the different. But I'm a little cruel in my teaching in that I expect them to find it and come back and tell me. And if they don't see it, we go over it and over it and over it. And about the 3rd or 4th time, I'm like, so notice here, it's finally different. Obviously, not the most supportive way to get that. I get it. I just get in my moods. But there's the motivation behind it is getting them to sort of take ownership of their learning. but maybe I'm starting that at too early an age.
Mm.
Anyone?
So my gut feeling on this comes from something that Noah Kageyama shared. And if you're not familiar with the Bulletproof Musician and his weekly emails, I strongly recommend you go find him, the Bulletproof Musician. And he actually talked about a sports study that I think directly addresses that, Jeffrey. That they studied two different sets of golfers, and one set of golfers was given like a standard size cup to putt into, and was told to take, I forget the number, so we'll say 100 practice shots. The other group, the experimental group, was given a giant, like a dinner plate to putt into. And over time, like every 20 shots, they got a smaller and smaller target. And the group that improved the most started with quite a large target, and it shrunk down over time. And so, Jeffrey, I think the advice that I would give you is that you're on the right track. I just would suggest starting with a larger target and find the target together and then start shrinking it, because I agree with your end goal that by the fifth song, I expect them to find the different thing by themselves, and they're really fast to do it. But I'd love to hear from other folks while I'm skimming the chat. Anyone else?
I like to do a thing where I'll build in, where we'll figure out how to clap the rhythm or whatever. Maybe we'll count through it in the first case, and then we'll try to add clapping on that. We usually sing back and forth. We'll look and try and name the notes that we recognize. And we'll basically do all of that stuff before I ever ask them to actually try and play it, just so we feel as familiar with it as possible and like we've really explored it before they sit down and actually put their hands on the keyboard for it. And it seems to work pretty well for most ages. The adults are a little trickier to convince to sing, but you know, I understand that.
Right. And that, I think, goes back to more how we learn language, that we learn how to say a word first, and then someone shows us this is what it looks like when it's written down. And as I've shifted to that style of teaching what you're describing, I find that my students are more engaged, less frustrated. People don't learn well when they're frustrated. All they can think about is that they're steamed. And so keeping it engaged and supportive, you can pack more information in, and at the end you can say, you can do the thing, here's what it looks like. Karen asks, how do I help students who have a serious difficulty seeing and hearing and feeling patterns? I think you're already well on your way to acknowledging that there's 3 different skills involved. So I would isolate them at first. I would talk about seeing patterns, just because in schools, so much of what you have is visual, that I would include a strong visual element. That I would do like 2/4 and a half note, just because the difference is really easy to see. And I would have them do it a lot. And then I would say the pattern is short, short, long, short, short, long. And I would do it until they agree and I agree that there's the same thing. Hearing patterns, I think sometimes as teachers, we get really hung up on terminology. And I'm saying this without knowing your teaching style at all. But I know a lot of teachers who want their student to be able to say C, D, E. And what they're after is that the kid can notice that the notes are going up and the letters are changing. And that's 2 different things. And so as often as not, I'll be going note, up, up. And acknowledging that we're just focusing on one element of the pattern makes it easier to recognize. Feeling will come later. I think feeling is a level of internalization, and feeling might take 2 years. I'm really sorry to say that and be the bearer of bad news, but I would isolate what can they see, what can they hear, and if you have a student who's really stuck on this, I will, if I think at like an intervention level is necessary, I'll sit down with the kid and say, you're really smart in piano at dynamics or emotional expression. I want you to be able to match that with pattern recognition, which is down here. And so I do this having pre-planned it, but I'll announce that we're going to do a boot camp that will last 4 to 8 weeks. And we'll spend up to half the lesson time doing intensive work on the thing where they need help. I've done this with rhythm. Everybody after a year on Zoom got pedaling boot camp, where we went through and sight read super easy pieces and just worked on pedal coordination and what can you actually hear now that you're in person again. So I would just do some deep, deep work on that. Looking back at the chat, and if there's follow-up questions that you have, please pop those in the chat or ask them. Dice with crazy shapes, repetition with the dice. So that comment from Eliana, could you speak more to how you use dice to teach repetition? Do they have to play something that as many times as they roll?
And it could mean a variety of things, but I just found that it's like, if I just sit there and be like, okay, we're gonna do this 5 times, I can see the color draining from their face. So I usually put a little dice so that they have something physical. Usually I set it to like 5, and then they can turn it to the next face every time they do a correct repetition. And then with each repetition, I ask them, oh, should we turn the dice? Is it ready? And they get to decide whether or not they're going to turn the dice down and make it all the way down to 1 or something. But for me, what matters is that they have the comfort of something physical to keep track of, instead of just some abstract idea in the teacher said do 5 times, and I don't know exactly how many times that would be, so it's a project and we work on it together. But I'm not a big believer in mindless repetition, which is not what you talked about at all. So every time we repeat, it needs to be meaningful and productive. You can repeat something 20 times and nothing gets done, which is how I practice. But that's not how I tell my students to practice. So, but I really like the points you brought up. Different words, but same ideas. So they're really, really good.
Yeah, so I'll share a few other things that I use in that way. One is that I use fingers, that I'll say they have to get it 3 times or 5 times, but I will give half points. So if you play your repetition, but the counting was terrible, you might have 1.5. And so you have to get to 3, but that really means you're going to do it 2 more times. And what I love about this partial acknowledgement business is that they still have to do it more times, but it says, I see you trying. And I will take away half a point sometimes if they have a hard time the next time around. This would be with a student that I know quite well, that I know that they're up for that. The other thing that I've done on Zoom is that for every time that you play it successfully, you earn a new emoji. And so you can go through and give reactions. That's a really great way to count how many things they've done. If I'm not counting repetitions, I will go through and say, play it forte, play it piano, play it staccato, play it legato. And that way you keep them engaged because you're changing what you ask for each time, but you still get your 5 repetitions in. So that's the other way to hack. Like if you don't have the time to do the spaced repetition, asking for a different thing each time will keep it engaging.
Yeah.
Something I do with like a whiteboard, I'll like write 3 stick people on it, and then their goal is, so I give them like a manageable chunk where if they go slow enough they can get it, and if they get it right they get another stick person. If they get it wrong, I erase one, we make some dramatic dying sound, and then if they get to 5 they win. So, and they always win, so that way they only have to play it twice perfectly. Usually the first time they'll go too fast, and then one will die, and then they'll realize, oh yes, I can go slower, and then I can do this, and then they'll hit them all. So
I love that. To be honest, a lot of what I'm looking for isn't a particular number of repetitions. I'm looking for 2 in a row that are good. That we talk about how many people will try and they get not great, not great, not great. They nail it, and the first time they say, yep, done it, I got this. And what they don't realize is that the next phase goes something like good, bad, good, bad. And after that, you start to get to good, 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 bad, good, good, good. And that's the territory where I want them to be. And so if you ask them to get it twice in a row correct, or like recital quality 3 times in a row correct, that consecutive times really is powerful and painful. But I only ask for stuff that works.
Yeah.
Karen says that sounds.
Sorry, I was just saying sometimes having like even a small stake of getting a stick person or, you know, having one die and then be reincarnated is enough motivation to be like, oh yes, I have to be self-aware.
Yeah, all right. So I'm scrolling through. Kageyama is great. Yes, I've learned so much. So Karen follows up saying, by feeling I meant something a truly tone deaf person could notice. The little girl is still pre-reading. So I'm going to say that for myself, as a pre-reading pianist, I sang absolutely every song that I played, and I never matched pitch. And bless her heart, my very first piano teacher, Mrs. Lovett, never said a word. And she ran into me like a decade later when I was in high school and said, every single song you would sit there and say, Mrs. Lovett, this one is so beautiful. And then I would sing something that had nothing to do with the text or the pitches. And I'm so grateful to her because as an adult, I can match pitch. I can still sing and play at the same time. And it has been boundlessly useful. And I use it so often, especially now that I'm 6 feet away, I can sing the correction I want when before I would have just reached over and pushed the piano around. With someone who's very young and pre-reading, I would start with simple stuff. I would start with, can they identify that things are the same? And then can you identify, so like, if they hear C, 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 can they hear that C is the same every time? If you can play C, C, D, C, can they identify that one of the notes is different? Can they identify up? Because people hear large shapes first before they hear precision. I think in grad school they called it melodic contour, that if you took a highlighter and you highlighted the melody, what shape would you get? And so I would start with, can she see when things go up? Can she see when things go down? And then I would start to refine, can she hear steps on a scale versus skips? And those are really abstract for singers. And so for a pianist, it's easier. That I would focus on physically manipulating the keys over feeling it at first, just because I think that's how I learned it. I'll be curious. I'd love to connect with you in a year or two and see how she's doing. You've really piqued my curiosity now. Big soft dice in different fun colors. Yes, I've heard really great things about that. 3 is the golden number. Yes, absolutely. That after 3 times of a repetition, there's something about your brain that it's just not going to be engaged. Note up, up. Yes, absolutely. Note up, up, note down, down. I've been playing for a children's choir, and the choir director will show skips like this. And so I will wind up doing that as well, that you can have note up, up, but note skip, skip is also a really helpful way to teach patterns. Eric, thank you. I'm so glad that this has been helpful for non-pianists as well. Slow mode, yes. If your student has watched the movie Zootopia, asking your student to play as slow as a sloth is awesome. And I've even had a student who got in trouble and needed an apology from his mom that she thought he was being sarcastic to practice as slow as he was. And I love that this happened. Yeah, raise my fingers, make ding, happy sounds. Let me see here. Yeah, I adore making sound effects. My students are totally used to hearing me go because it kind of jolts you back to going, oh yes, that shouldn't happen. So Karen, did you have a question for me?
Yes, as long as you touched on slow, I remember years ago at a Seattle Music Teachers Association, we had a presenter and he was excellent, like you're excellent. And he made some generalized statements. It was maybe a controversial presentation about some differences you might expect in boys versus girls. And that is that boys tend to want to play things faster, sooner. Well, I find that maybe is true no matter what gender and how to slow them down. And so I came up with this fun little thing because kids like still reading science fiction and stuff like that. And I say, to make this passage be more steady, we have to play more slowly. And then they'll play it at exactly the same too fast speed, and it's really unsteady. So I say, okay, we're going to get in a spaceship together. We're going to go to some galaxy. And where we are, gravity is now 4 times heavier than what it was on Earth. So I'm going to count, and every single beat, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. And you don't play beat 2 until I say 1 again. And you just have to, you sit there and you can plan ahead of time, and you can cheat and use the pedal to hold on the sound while you move your hands around, whatever it takes. And they're really, really steady. And then when they do that, I say, yay, we get back in the spaceship. We can go off for another expedition. Oh, now we landed on a planet where gravity is 3 times that of Earth. So I'm going to count to 3 slowly for every quarter note. And every time I say 1, you play the next quarter note. And they do really well on that. And then we get down to 2, and they're doing really well. And then we get down to 1. And most of the time they succeed. And they play it steadily. So that's one of my, yes, happy teacher dance moments.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to let somebody else speak, but I'll just tell you the title of my other one. I don't remember where I got these ideas. I call it the 6-Step to Great Pianist Hands Together.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Please at least type in what that is into the chat. I'm seeing 12 new messages. I'm loving this. This is exactly what I hoped would happen.
I'll try to type it, and I'm sure nobody will understand what it is, but my students understand after I have them do it. But I'll do that because I want others to talk. Thanks.
Okay, so then I'll quickly share that one of my favorite tips, again with Zoom teaching, which has so many, I'm going to say, built-in challenges. One of the built-in advantages is that you can ask your student to mute themselves and play with you. And I usually give them 2 tries, because the first time they have the kind of a face, because I know that I played it right and I know they didn't. And then it tends to just morph the counting and the notes to be more like yours if they're really close. Let's see. I'm skimming again. 6-step methods to great pianists when hands have different rhythms from each other. Great drumming. I'm scrolling and trying to skim. Oh, I thought there were 12 more. Wow, here we go. So 6-step method for getting hands together. Okay, so Karen, I think I'm going to let you go ahead and verbally describe your 6-step method. Okay. I will say that along with the whole petting your pet with 2 hands, you can practice petting your pet with different rhythms at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at a sonatina here, and I'll just take one measure from it. It's Andante from the New England Sonatina by Addison Porter, who died in 1941. And so step 1 is great drummer. You do not touch the piano. You show me your 2 hands, and you've got 2 thighs. And if you see a right hand note that the note right hand has to play, the right hand hits the right thigh. If you see that the left hand has to hit a note, the left hand hits the left thigh. If you notice they both have to strike a key at the same time, both hands strike both thighs at the same time. So the rhythm that I have here is in 6/8 time, and the right hand has a pickup note, 8th note, then a quarter, 8th. Wait a minute, I want to find, yes. 8th, quarter, 8th, quarter, 8th, dotted quarter. Okay, left hand, nothing under the pickup note, quarter, 8th rest, quarter note, 8th. So I would do right, both, 2, right, both, 2, both, 2, 3. Okay, and then I say, once they've done it, I don't care how slow it is, and I hope it's kind of steady, but I'm not super insistent on that, if they count it aloud, because they tend to count slowly and fairly steadily. I hereby promote you too, and I don't mean to insult drummers by this, 3-year-olds splashing on the black keys. Now, I don't know if you can see my piano keyboard here.
Mine looks remarkably similar. I love it.
Okay, and so you make two fists, and you put your knuckles on a group of three and a knuckles on another group of three. Let's pick something that's low and high so I can hear the difference when we're having to do Zoom lessons. Okay, and so this would be right, both, two, right, both, two, right, both, two, three. And I explained before that the difference between this and slapping your thighs is when you slapped your thighs, I couldn't tell because it all sounded staccato. But this way you can stay down into the key bed and we can hear that sustained tone. Congratulations, I hereby promote you from 3-year-old splashing on the black keys to lousy hunt and peck typist. So make two fists, stick out your index finger, and what key are we in? We're in E flat major. So what's your tonic?
E flat.
Okay, your left hand is going to put finger 2 on an E flat, and your right hand's going to put finger 2 on what's your dominant?
B flat.
And your right hand's going to put finger 2 on a B flat. And it's basically like 3-year-old splashing on the black keys, but now you're doing it with your index finger. Right, both, 2, right, both, 2, both, 2, 3. Congratulations! Okay, now it's going to get exciting. Which hand would you like to play for real?
The right hand.
Yay! Okay, you can take a freebie if you want. It's okay. But the left hand is going to stay in a fist, stick out only finger 2, so it's not tempted to get into any mischief. And it's going to stay on that E flat. And the right hand gets to play for real now. Right, both, 2, right, both, 2, both, 2, 3. Okay, now, vice versa. This is usually the absolute hardest part. And it doesn't matter. If you told me you wanted the left hand first, this would still be the hardest step, okay? But this is step 5 already. We're almost there. So now you make the right hand close into a fist, stick out finger 2, and it's on the dominant, the B flat, and the left hand gets to play for real. Right, both, 2, right, both, 2, both, 2, 3. Of course, I warned them that the sounds are really strange, and most kids love it. They like making these weird sounds, especially on the black keys, right? Hey, congratulations! Now, you know the last step?
Everything.
Great pianist, as written. And so you play both hands as written. Right, both, 2, right, both, 2, right, both, 2, 3. And the neat thing is they're already playing at pretty close to performance speed, I find. And they also are playing steadily. And the constant was their method of counting aloud. You know, it might be 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, depending on the level.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen this fail, and I tend to take one phrase and we do it at the lesson together, and they are so jazzed about it. They'll go home and I'll say, just do one more phrase this week, and they come back and they've got the whole part A done.
Love it.
Comes together. Yeah.
May I offer you variations on a theme?
Yeah, please.
One of, because I do a similar thing with tricky passages with my students, but I have a phase where I have them pull down the keyboard cover or play on their lap or a desk and do the fingering on a flat surface, because that removes pitches, which I think is what a lot of your 3-year-old stuff is after, but it lets them practice rhythm and fingering without worrying about pitches or accidentals.
Right. So I tend to use this when they've got a new piece and the assignment was learn the melody. Where's the melody? Oh, the right hand has a melody in this piece. Okay. Learn the right hand this week. They come back. Yeah, you got it. Okay. What's our goal going to be for next week? Because I want them to take ownership. And it's kind of obvious that they're going to say, well, I think I should learn the left hand as far as I learned the right hand. Good. And then the third week they come back and they say, I'm scared. I can't get hands together. They're just too different. So I've kind of already gone past that. And I forgot to mention that I think the reason this works so well is you're working out from the big muscles. when I ask adult students to do this, they usually fail several times, kids too, on step one, drumming. Their biceps don't get the coordination between what we call the hands, much less the fingers. So that's why we drum first. And then when you're doing the knuckles, that's actually using the forearm. And then when you're doing the fingers, that's actually using the hand.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to share, have you ever been on the internet and seen one of those? It's usually an animated picture that will say something like, if you're right-brained, the ballerina spins one way, and if you're left-brained, she spins the other way. Or right-brained people will see this picture as being green and gold, and left-brained people will see it as pink and black.
Yeah,
What?
I don't remember it. It didn't stick with me. Tell
Sure. What happens when you have one hand play more stuff is that the corresponding brain half is more active, and it's actually very challenging to activate the other half of the brain right away. If you have your student, I have my students stand up and walk around the bench. If you have them stand up, walk around the bench, and then try it again, sometimes that's enough of a pause to reset the brain, and they can more easily do the other thing. So, like I said, variations on a theme.
Yeah, I have them slap the green cushy couch for the reset button.
See, there we go. Another reset button. Fabulous. So I think at this point, I'm going to just scroll through and see if anyone else had questions or comments. Do feel free to wave at me or pop stuff in the chat. And I'm kind of coming back to Katie to see if there's anything else that you would like to happen today.
I don't in particular. I think this has been great. I guess I would like to maybe open it up to questions if you're okay with that, Sarah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can kind of scroll.
This has exceeded my expectations. It's honestly really scary to plan a presentation and only plan half the material. And this has gone so well, and that's because it's been a collaboration. So thank you all for that.
Yep. It's usually a success if you can get a bunch of teachers in a room and talk about their favorite ways to teach. So that's great. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Sarah or anything else that they'd like to say?
I have a question, if I may. I am a violin and viola teacher, not a piano teacher, but I've learned a lot. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Wondering, I'm still all online because of Delta, and I'm high risk. So I've been thinking, okay, how have you, were you online totally for a while? How did you modify some of the suggestions that you made, with using the highlighters and all the kind of thing that works in person, but maybe not online? Or how did you modify your methods?
Sure. I'm going to look back at my outline really fast. I was completely online March of 2020 through June of 21. And then I did a gradual rollout, and I still have, I think, 20 or 30% of my families are online only still. And I'm offering online switches as needed if anyone in your family is symptomatic. So there's still a hefty portion of my lessons that are online. And I see the question about ghost beats, and we'll get to that. For really young students, and so I don't know if you have people that are under age 10, it depends. I've taught some really self-possessed 8-year-olds and some really, I'm going to say, disengaged 9-year-olds. So as appropriate, having a parent in the lesson for the form analysis where it's same and different. At the beginning of COVID, I was asking the mom who could read music to show the child where was it different, to be my hands and point for me. Now that we're a year in, that child is now asked to show mom where is it different. And so having the child show the mom, and then the mom can give me the thumbs up or thumbs down feedback. For eye tracking, I'm very fortunate that my tablet has a rear camera, so you're going to get to see the back side of my room. And to teach eye tracking, I pop my piece of music on camera and I point like this. And then for the piano itself, where I'm not today, I have an over-the-hands keyboard. And this, I don't know how this would work at all for violin. I don't know how much you look at your instrument. I don't remember what that journey was like for my sister. But for a keyboard format, I'll take erasers or my pencil and I'll lay them out. These are the notes we're working with in Twinkle Twinkle. Here is my crayon on C and my pen on G, and looking at them on the camera. So I'm just going to have to say, I bet it's working. Have the child point at the page for you and show you where are their eyes going to go. I'm realizing now that was something I ought to have mentioned much earlier, that when students are learning eye tracking for themselves, they can play with one hand and point with the other, the same way that you read a beginning book to yourself, that you point to each word as you go. And this is revolutionary for helping a really young child gain independence in practicing. For violin, this could be pointing to each note while you count it. I do a lot of you point while I count and clap for you, and then you point and count and show me what you did last time. And what I'm really after is that I can see their finger moving across the page and that it matches what they're saying. If I'm wanting to show them how to mark stuff, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. I pop a whiteboard on here and I draw the notes, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but I can sit here and say the C and the D, I want you to mark them like this so that you know that you need to practice more. Or I want you to write in the counting like I'm doing, and I'm showing them how would I mark their score for them. I don't know what your setup is like. Sandra, is this something that you would feel comfortable doing with your students?
Yes, right now I just have teenage and adult students.
Awesome.
But yeah, I should use the whiteboard. Good idea.
I adore the whiteboard. It took me a year to find it. I'm so happy I have it now. Better late than never. What really will catch you by surprise is an enthusiastic student who will suddenly jump in and start notating stuff while you're talking. That's a real shock the first 10 times it happens. So forewarned is forearmed, I suppose. Visual overwhelm is a little bit harder to teach, but you can usually ask them to get a Post-it note and hide everything except the first measure and to move the Post-it note over. For the mental map of focus.
Do you have the teacher outlets? Like, I find that this stuff is helpful when I have it, like, when I have either a PDF or I have it, like, online where I can share it, too. So something to look into would be if those books are available online and if you could just, like, screen share it. Because that's been really valuable for me to have, like, this, and I can just use, like, you know, I can draw on it like this.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's the Piano Adventures Atlas. It's like, it costs money, but it has been very worth it. It's like the whiteboard now.
To be honest, I haven't done the Atlas because I'm scared of technology. This might be, knock on wood, my first time where nothing has malfunctioned, that my gift is to break things by touching them. And so I've been very old school, let's use paper books. And so right now, at least, I'm only teaching books where I own a paper copy, and we're both referencing the same copy. I'm trying to see what else I did. For the mental map of focus points, that would look remarkably like what Katie was drawing in her music, that I would, in my case, I would do a screen share, I would show them the page that I'm looking at, and I would say, right here, I want you to mark this note. And depending on the treble, I might say, I want you to write in 1, 2, because it needs to be longer. Or I want you to write in that that's a D, or that's finger 2. That I have already identified what the treble is. And so I'm showing them how to mark the thing that I want to be different. Right? And then that way, after they've marked it, and then I have them show me how they marked it if they're new at this, and then to play it for me. Having them show you is potentially high risk. It depends on the skill of, well, you said teens, so you won't get a view of the whole house. That'll go well for you. The self-evaluation is really Zoom friendly because the thumbs up, thumbs down for violin, how were the notes, how was your intonation, how was the counting, that they can all do on screen. For Carrie, so Sandra, if that answers your question, I'd love to talk with Carrie about getting beginners between 4/4 time and 3/4 time. I think I see a nod. I'm going to hope for this. Okay, good. All right. So for Carrie, one of the things I find is that if we've been teaching a lot of 4/4, and I'm going to try and scroll through here and find you so I can get to interact with you as well. There we go. For 4/4, we've spent months and months sometimes on everything's in 4, got to count to 4. I will pick the song that's in 3/4 and I'll play it in 4/4. And if possible, this works really well if it's a song they already know. And of course, I'm blanking on it. I'm going to do Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how... And so I would sing it wrong on purpose. Amazing Grace. Nope. So I'm gonna pause that idea, but I would demonstrate a piece that they know, and I would make beat 4. I would add beat 4 into it so that they could hear the difference. And then I've had really good luck on Zoom with having the kids sway in their place because it's difficult to feel the difference between 4/4 and 3/4. But you can have them sway from side to side every time the downbeat happens again. And the beauty of this is you can stay on camera. You don't lose them, they don't walk away. But you can sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I would play their current tune with the sway. I would do a lot of singing. I would have them mute themselves and play along with me. And usually somewhere around the 10th time through it, it gets better and I praise the change. Does that help?
Yeah, it's one of those things where the counting specifically is what's throwing him off. If I have him clap the rhythm back to me, he's fine. If I have him sing the notes at first, he's fine, where it's just like C, hold, D, C, hold, right? Mm-hmm. That's fine. As soon as he counts to 3, he's right back to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then that transfers right back over into his notes. So as soon as then, even if I have him stop counting altogether at all for an entire week, it doesn't matter. That ghost beat comes right back in immediately.
So for that, I would do a boot camp and I would plan a curriculum where you have 6 or 8 completely different songs that are all in 3, where there's no other challenge element, right? Where they're not having to worry about moving or whatever his challenges are, that nothing's in there. And I would remove counting for a minute and I would focus on things like there's a lot of fruits, strawberry, 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 strawberry. And so I would make sure that he's really comfortable with the skill first, and then I would layer the counting over top of the skill that he then knows. And
I said,
enlightening. You then might go back through all the same list of pieces, having counted them strawberry, blueberry, raspberry, pie. You might then go back through all of them with 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But I would do a lot of what is it like to play the music without any numbers, because you said he's fine until numbers are added. And then I would do some chanting of numbers, because I think the chanting of numbers is a separate skill from playing the thing correctly. And so I would get him able to play the thing correctly, able to chant the numbers, and then unite chanting and playing. And so you're probably looking at 6 weeks to 2 years of work on this, but that matches what I see in my studio.
Yeah, it's like a recurring issue every time we land on a piece that's in 3/4, and so it's like as long as I see a little bit of improvement in the rhythm, we just pass it and move on. But it's one of those things that I think, because again, I'm on Zoom, so it wouldn't be as difficult if we were in person and we could get up and like my normal techniques are like marching around the room and doing a lot of like body work, and that just doesn't work as well on Zoom,
So I would
unfortunately.
have him clap on his lap, like what I can't remember her name. I'm blinking. Karen. Karen was having us clap on our lap. You can have him clap on his lap in Zoom. You can have him sway. I would try where you play the music and he is on mute and he has to play with you, and where he either counts with you or plays with you or points at the page while you play it.
Yep.
And
done all of that.
okay, so then sometimes I will like put a pin in a challenging topic and say, we will not be on Zoom forever, and we're just going to fill that hole later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a song in 3/4 that he already knows and likes away from the piano?
The thing is, he's really talented little guy. He's very young. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of music happening in his house.
Okay.
And because I think he started school during the pandemic, I don't know how much music he's encountered in school. So, and any of the folk songs that we've encountered thus far, he hasn't known them at all. Like any of the, like even the basics, except for like Happy Birthday. I think that's the only one that he seemed to know when I've used that in the demonstrations.
Isn't Happy Birthday in 3? I think it is.
Yes.
Okay.
I use it all the time to demonstrate.
Yeah. So then I would start doing Happy Birthday every week through Christmas.
Could you put lyrics to the song that he's doing and then sing it together? Like, I like my cats a lot, they are great. Or, sometimes that works for my students, and then have them sing. Then you sing, then they sing, then lyrics work sometimes for me too.
Yeah. The other thing is that I'm sure you've tried this, but I'm going to share it anyway, just in case. If I clear my previous stuff, if you've got your measures and they're all written up, I will be very clear with students that are older than 7 that what I'm after is for it to go across the beat or across the bar line, and that I want it to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1.
Yeah. So we did something his recent lesson was yesterday. So we did a thing where we clapped the rhythm for 1, 2, 3, 1. And then we played it on a single note, and then we played it with 2 notes, and then we played it as it was supposed to be. And he would be able to get that 1, 2, 3, 1, but then he couldn't put the 2 measures together. He just started, like, it was like he would play 1, 2, 3, 1, measure 1 to 2. And then he would repeat it, starting on the first beat of measure 2 and taking it into the first beat of measure 3. And he couldn't do it either clapping or playing.
So then I would focus on getting it done successfully, doing it twice in a row, doing it 3 times in a row, where like each week you're adding 1 measure to his list.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I get a student who's like that. It's why I have a Hands Together boot camp, is because there's only been 2 people who've needed it, but for those 2 people, it worked.
Okay.
So every once in a while you get a student that just has a sideways quirk, and it will wear off.
Right. Eventually.
I'm so grateful for Keith Snell at my first national conference looking at me and saying, "You're doing everything right. You've got this. You care for your student. It gets better." Like, I just needed to hear that so badly.
He's such a treat and so delightful in many, many other ways. And every time we land on a 3/4 song, I'm like, oh, because he's also a little bit of a perfectionist, and I know he gets discouraged when he doesn't feel like he's able to be successful. So
So that's where I would say the self-evaluation is good because it lets you say, congratulations, perfectionist, your notes are amazing. Congratulations, your counting is amazing. There's a strange pause. That's where I want to work.
Yeah.
And it helps perfectionists to not say the whole piece sucked. It helps them say one aspect of it was less than ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm just gonna scroll back through. I love that there's a light bulb moment. Yes, I've had students who say strawberry, strawberry. It wears off. 3 small stuffed animals. What I like about Sandra's suggestion to have 3 small stuffed animals is that if you had an imaginary 4th one that you could say, here it is, like, is he aware that he's got a pause in there?
No.
Okay.
He's not. And it's
So
like he
I would
does it
introduce a
correctly
sound effect.
sometimes, like,
But
but then
if you're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, having a sound effect in there to say, I don't want to have time to make that. Just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And maybe without numbers at first so that he's feeling it first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think we should wrap this up pretty soon.
Sure. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, awesome. If you want to look through the rest of those comments and see if there's anything you want to answer really quick.
I think we've just all gotten really invested in no more ghost beats.
Yes. Oh, it's a valuable topic, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, so I think we've done it. I'm seeing lots of excitement around stuffed animals and lyrics and counting in different orders, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been really fun.
I've had a wonderful time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Mariah will, if it's okay, Mariah, can you leave the meeting room open for everyone to chat? And then we're all done for today. Oh, yep. So cool. I'll see you guys soon. And Sarah, you're welcome to continue. We just don't want to take advantage of your time. So if you want to stay and chat, you can. I just want to make sure that you don't have to.
That's awesome. Yes. I'll linger a little bit.
Cool.